was 1932. The Chicago Cubs are playing the New York Yankees in the World Series.
It was Game 3 in Chicago. The score was tied 4-4.
It was, in fact, the 5th inning.
Babe Ruth is up at bat.
First pitch, strike. The fans proceed to insult Babe Ruth, and the Cubs players begin to laugh at him.
Oh. Second pitch comes. Ball. Third pitch comes again. Ball. Finally, fourth pitch. Strike.
Right before the 5th pitch, Babe Ruth points to center field.
The pitch is thrown.
Babe Ruth makes contact with the ball.
The crowd goes wild.
Yeah! Yeah!
Yeah!
Go, Babe Ruth!
The Yankees go on to win the 1932 World Series.
Babe Ruth called shot as one of the greatest events in baseball history. However, it is also one of the most controversial.
The debate goes on about whether or not he pointed to where the ball was going.
The Chicago Cubs pitcher would later say that Babe Ruth did not make the gesture. Ruth says, if he had made that gesture, I would have knocked him down with the next pitch.
Babe Ruth, being the savvy player that he was, remained relatively quiet about what happened. He did not deny the called shot, but he did not talk about it either.
Emotion, as a way of knowing, is powerful. It shapes behavior, thoughts, and the pursuit of knowledge. The fans of both esteemed teams felt very differently about Babe Ruth's called shot. For example, Cubs fans believe that he did not point to center field. He would have rather pointed to the Chicago bench or the pitcher himself. The Yankees fans want to be the winners and write their own history and say that he called one of the greatest shots of all time.
Language as a way of knowing. The use of words to convey knowledge, personal or shared. The testimonies of people who were there provide us with primary sources, allowing for a greater sense of trustworthiness. Or in the case of the Cubs pitcher, who says Babe Ruth did not in fact point his bat, the primary source makes us doubt the event. Lastly, language can only convey limited meaning, and the story of Babe Ruth's called shot has changed over the years, albeit very slightly, but it is based on each person taking the story they have heard and altering it upon their retelling. Each person tells it slightly differently. That is how language limits the conveyance of history.
Reasoning is a way of knowing. Reasoning is a collective endeavor by which people construct meaning together by exchanging, modifying, and improving their ideas and opinions. The event of Babe Ruth calling a shot has been reported from various different perspectives. However, one thing that they have in common is that they have been exchanged throughout history. However, as aforementioned, there has been controversy surrounding his called shot. For when disputes arise, what is at issue is not only the substance of fact and matters, but also the appropriateness of the reasons given for acceptance of the facts, and the validity of the logical procedures used in researching conclusions. Naturally, different fans reach different conclusions based on the called shot. As Tristan stated, the New York Yankees fans obviously were like, that was an awesome shot, we want to write this history. He was able to call one of the greatest hits in the history of baseball. And then there would be Cubs fans who were like, no, he obviously didn't call that shot because they don't want it to. And their reasoning behind that is just they lost, so they don't want to believe it. So he didn't have the ability to call such a great shot.
Sense perception provides useful information, yet also displays the many limitations that come along with it. Personal experiences are sensations that are private and sometimes incommunicable, and humans are sensitive to certain ranges of stimuli. One of the limitations that is displayed in the event is the fact that not all knowers agree on what is perceived or what really happened. Where Babe Ruth's bat was pointed is debated. There are three possible options. Babe Ruth pointed to the Cubs bench, he pointed to the Cubs pitcher, or he pointed to center field. Depending on which person was asked, the person may say that he called his home run, or he just made a simple gesture to the opposing team.
The coherence check. When we check for coherence with a historical event, we look for two things. The first of which is, does it agree with what I know? Does it cohere with what I know? Or rather, for the purpose of gaining of knowledge, does it contradict with what I know? Next, we must ask ourselves where the story comes from. Is the source reliable? We can do research to look into this, and if multiple sources cohere with one another, then the account is probably true. In terms of Babe Ruth's called shot, we must ask ourselves this. When given all of the varied accounts, some of which say that the called shot did not even happen, can we truly trust that Babe Ruth called his shot? Based on the vast amounts of evidence, whether it be video or accounts of the players, the validity of Babe Ruth's called shot is definitely brought into question. However, each person must make a personal judgment about whether or not the called shot happened when it comes to the coherence check.
Correspondence check. Correspondently checking an event requires evidence presented not just from the victim, sources, as well as observations. Or another word for victim would be the opposing side of the event. Babe Ruth's called shot can correspondently checked as it has all of the above. Here's an example. Give it a second. Here, pause it.
While this example is loading, the next is pragmatic check. This check includes questions of, did it work? Can the event be replicated? Babe Ruth's called shot ended in a home run whether he called it or not. His home run allowed the Yankees to take the pennant and make his mark on history. The debate goes on whether or not he called it, and this event cannot be replicated no matter how much people try to. It could have been a freak accident, or he could have had the ability to call his shot.
There's number one, there's no question.
Was one of the very greatest hitters ever. The 1932 series is Babe's last, yet it produces his greatest moment.
Babe Ruth in 1932 on your head. What did Ruth call his shot off Charlie Root?
Yeah. Oh, what a moment.
I'll never forget it. Was a tough series. Both clubs riding each other, doing everything to get each other's coat. Well, after this one particular time when I went to bat, Charlie Root was picked.
Yelling from the Cub dugout was positively selfless. As well as from the fans. They were in on this. was a Chicago crowd, and they were throwing things and yelling, and Ruth was standing in the batter's box, yelling back at them between pitches.
And the first pitch ball was a called strike. Well, I thought it was outside and didn't like it very much.
More yelling, back and forth. Strike two, more yelling.
Well, I didn't like that one either, so I let it go. Well, I stepped out of the box, and by that time they were over there going crazy.
The volume coming from the stands was so loud that some of the club players were running out of the dugout and when they had to their mouths to make sure Ruth heard them. And then he makes his famous gesture.
Well, I looked down the center field, I tore him. I said, I'm going to hit the next pitch ball.
The purpose of TOK is to provide us with the ability to question how and why we know. And due to this ability, questions surrounding Babe Ruth's called shot have surfaced.
And obviously with TOK, we should have the ability to further ask questions about a historical event as history is a way of knowing. And one question, broad question would be, how does emotion affect knowledge? Going back to the ways of knowing that my group has presented, the desire from Yankees fans drove them to accept Babe Ruth's called shot because they wanted the called shot to be a part of Yankee history. One of the greatest hits of all time, being able to have the ability to call that, just fantastic. Whilst the Cubs fans' anger drove them to reject it because they were so upset about losing that they didn't want Babe Ruth to have that. They didn't want him to have the ability to call a shot.
More questions arise when we examine language as a way of knowing. How is the retelling of an event different from what actually happened? How does language alter or limit our historical knowledge of past events when given a first-hand account?